going to be chatting with Ms. Christina Botha, who is the manager of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and we're going to be speaking a little bit about hate speech. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, Rebecca.
My first question to you is, do you think that the Equality Act is effective in prescribing the offence of hate speech?
Okay, I think importantly to remember is we are regulating hate speech. So it specifically prohibits hate speech. So we, in terms of international, we are actually aligned. We are required to regulate it in terms of legislation. What I do think, what you often find is the remedies, or people feel it's not effective, because I don't think it's often utilized, the Equality Court. So Equality Court is actually quite unique in its way. It's accessible to the public. You don't need legal representation. The whole solution, the whole point of the Equality Court is to find amicable solutions for both parties, considering criminal sanctions might not always be the best option, or civil sanctions even as well. So an apology can, in some instances, be effective, or serving at a community, doing charity work for a specific organization focusing on non-racialism, for instance. That is also, so I've got very specific remedies. So I think, getting back to your question, the Equality Act is not utilized enough, in my opinion. Secondly, it does prohibit hate speech, but personally I don't think the prohibition of hate speech is in line with our constitutional standard, so that is quite a problem. And so we do need to firstly bring it in line with the constitutional standard of hate speech, provide proper guidance on how these key elements should be applied, then only, and make sure penalties reflect the severity of the case, then only we will see effective remedies as well.
Okay.
I hope it answers your question.
It does answer my question. So we're looking at a more a justice system that is more holistic in terms of how it seeks to address the problem. So it's not just criminal sanctions or civil sanctions, but we're looking for restorative justice as well.
Yes.
My second question for you is in terms of the South African Human Rights Commission and the work that it does in protecting equality, especially when it comes to hate speech. Do you think that the work of the Human Rights Commission is impactful? Do you think that they have the capacity to do the best or the most that they can when it comes to these kind of complaints?
I think the Human Rights Commission has a vital role in our society. I mean, it's a Chapter 9 institution, but what I do think we need to take into account is its capacity constraints, especially, and it's been underfunded for years as well, so that does impact its work. Considering hate speech complaints, so the Human Rights Commission specifically has to investigate hate speech complaints, and it's been criticized quite a bit recently about the manner of investigation. I definitely do think there is merit for criticism in this regard. We have seen late reports of him, and there is a feeling of, well, they're not properly investigating. And it could be a bigger problem of not being properly funded to ensure there are enough investigators. I think one of the biggest expenses is actually just salaries. So you can't even get to a core functions of, besides educating people, which also would be a means of actually addressing hate speech, getting to a core of where do these intolerances start. So I think that's also a big problem.
Okay, my final question for you is, do you think that in South Africa, especially with the number, particularly recently, number of complaints about hate speech, do you think that a lot of the times, or the people who are complained about, are using the freedom of expression in the Constitution as a scapegoat to spew vitriol, to say problematic things?
I think again, we need to go back to our Constitution and our understanding of hate speech. I mean, our offensive language it doesn't trigger hate speech. Hate speech is a very, very specific standard. I mean, it's a public incitement of hatred towards a specific group based on a characteristic such as, being gay, for instance, and there's a real risk of harm actually happening. Harm doesn't need to happen, but you need to, in order to protect that group, you prohibit and make sure the state acts on hate speech. So people's idea of hate speech, I think, is often also misplaced in a constitutional democracy. And freedom of expression is a hard-fought right in South Africa, and we need to be very, very sure. We need to be very cautious when it comes to attempts to limit freedom of expression. I think freedom of expression is a highly important political discourse, and again, it goes back to the Equality Act standards of not being too low when it comes to hate speech prohibition, in my view. And all in all, you need you need your courts, you need your Human Rights Commission to act in line with international standards. There's a constitutional standard of hate speech, which is in line with international standards. So if these institutions apply it in accordance with international standards, I think we will have a better understanding, or how can I say, it will be more uniform approach towards hate speech. But it goes down to also educating people of what is actually me ridiculing you or making an offensive statement isn't necessarily, it doesn't trigger hate speech. It might not be nice for you to hear, but freedom of, it's allowed in the freedom of expression.
Thank you so much, Christina, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.